Hi everyone. We are heading back home to finish off 42,000 square kilometers on the campaign trail, ending with door knocking and meet and greets in the southeast portion of this beautiful riding of Yorkton Melville. The timeline has been really tight, and I regret I couldn't spend the time I wanted to in all of our communities, so I'm hoping this is going to be helpful. There have been three main issues that have been concerns that I've been addressing face to face, on social media, through emails and phone calls. And the three issues are our promise to repeal the carbon tax, my leader's decision to not repeal the OIC firearms targeted by the Liberals, and our stand against mandatory vaccines and domestic travel passports. So I'm going to deal with the mandatory vaccines and passports in this video, and then I'll do two other short videos as well to talk about the other topics. So for those who looked to our recovery plan for information on our stand, it's not there. Why? Well, because pushing for mandatory vaccines and mandatory passports is a tactic of the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau that he introduced to attempt to use COVID as a wedge issue during the campaign. The Conservative Party leader, Erin O'Toole, who supports vaccination as a tool in fighting COVID, does not support mandatory vaccination. He respects the charter rights of individual Canadians to make their own health choices and to keep those choices personal and private. Canadians also have a charter right of freedom to travel within our country without harassment or interference by their government. Trudeau is indicating he will not even allow travel unless you prove you are double vaccinated. This is inappropriate and it's wrong. He does not have the authority to prevent you from traveling within your country. So, here are the following statements that our leader issued on mandatory vaccines and travel in Canada. Canadians have the right to make their own health choices. Rapid testing is needed for the unvaccinated to protect our most vulnerable Canadians. A Conservative government will require unvaccinated Canadian passengers to present a recent negative test result or pass a rapid test before getting on a bus, a train, a plane, or a ship. And we will require federal public servants who aren't vaccinated to pass a daily rapid test. So, rapid tests are finally being provided so that families and schools, workplaces, and individuals can use it if they want to ensure that they are not infected by the virus before visiting an elderly loved one, someone who is immune compromised, before going to work or going to school, and so on. If these had been provided at the beginning of the pandemic, as we continually called for, Canadians who were required to isolate because they had been exposed to someone who had COVID would have only had to have taken just a few minutes to do a rapid test to determine if they could go to school or work that day, rather than miss work, lose income, or fall behind in their studies. Instead, because of Trudeau's decision to isolate rather than provide those rapid tests, our economy faced far greater challenges and shutdowns due to those isolation restrictions. Now, in conversation with constituents, I have heard concerns that when required in a public environment, doing a rapid test does discriminate against the right to privacy for those who are or are not vaccinated and want to keep their information personal and private, and it doesn't consider all of the possibilities of spreading. Science has clearly shown that vaccinated Canadians can still contract and or carry the virus and variants. It may stand to reason then that perhaps either no one or all individuals should be required to rapid test to board public transit services. And another option that's suggested, as during the height of the pandemic before vaccines were available, travel entry points across Canada could again require temperatures to be taken, have travelers respond to health questions, and to agree to wear a mask, if possible. So, on the topic of international vaccine passports, Conservatives do support a streamlined system that helps Canadians verify their vaccine status so that they can travel abroad. Countries around the world are requiring proof of vaccination to enter their country, and in Canada there is a proof of vaccination maintained in 10 provinces and 3 territories. However, we will coordinate a system so that Canadians who wish to travel to countries that require a vaccine passport all have one internationally recognized document. It's up to individual foreign governments to establish vaccination rules for those who want to travel into their countries. And so that's a responsibility that the federal government has to make sure that whatever is required by those countries, we as the federal government can ensure that Canadians who want to travel have that opportunity to do so. Now, when it comes to provincial vaccine passports that are controlling within your own communities what events you can go to and that type of thing, we respect the right of provincial governments to implement and manage their own public health guidelines. This Prime Minister does not respect our provinces. And this is their right and their opportunity to do this, so we will respect that. The Conservative Party will follow all public health measures and expects candidates to do the same in their respective jurisdictions. So right now, we, fortunately, are living in a province where our Premier does not mandate passports and has not mandated vaccines. I encourage you to contact the Premier and your MLA to thank them and to encourage them to continue to persevere in the face of pressure to implement such a passport that discriminates against those who choose not to take the current vaccines being offered by our federal government. On one note in regard to the election, there's been a lot of confusion, and I just want to make it really clear. This is on the Elections Canada website. Elections Canada does not require electors to provide proof of vaccination. Every Canadian has the right to vote freely in this federal election, so I just want to make sure you're aware of that. As I finish up, it is so exciting to know that Canadian researchers are close to providing an alternative COVID vaccine to the current mRNA vaccine choices. Medicago, with a plant-based vaccine, is very strongly focused on making sure they are submitting scrupulously correct, accurate data to Health Canada. Of course, that doesn't mean that this federal government under Trudeau will make the decision to include these vaccines, and right now he's choosing to only offer the mRNA versions. However, our own vaccine and infectious disease organization at the University of Saskatchewan has been on the forefront of COVID-19 research, including being the first Canadian organization to isolate the virus, the first to develop an animal model of infection, and the first in Canada to have a traditional vaccine candidate in preclinical testing, advancing towards human clinical trials. This means that we will have a traditional vaccine available eventually, and it disturbs me that our Prime Minister did not support our Canadian researchers hard and strong right off the beginning, and that's why they're behind in providing their research and providing us this option that I believe all Canadians would truly support. Finally, I will attach 3 news stories in the first comment on this post that speak to our leader opposing mandatory vaccines for public servants and travelers. I'm very just frustrated that the People's Party of Canada chose to put on their Facebook page a snapshot of a Globe and Mail article that indicates O'Toole will implement mandatory vaccine passports. That gave a very misleading perception of what our priorities were and what our commitments were to Canadians. We will respect the right of Canadian citizens to make their own decisions on their health care and whether or not to keep that private, and to have an international passport to travel to other countries that require one, as that is a responsibility of their federal government. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to sharing with you on the issues of firearms and the Liberal carbon tax. Take care.